Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay. So if the viewers look at the screen,
this is not just a deck of
Jesus. All right, there we go. This music's better. Okay. You know, I've noticed that what motivates me to do anything is when I feel I can create a value greater than myself. And so really, I don't know, but I think this could be a probable purpose to life, that we are in the game, in a sort of interstellar game of value creation. And in some sense, loving actions are allowing there to be more value, and hateful actions are denying the value. You see, an evil person, in some sense, it's as if they are so it's as if you are not content with yourself, so when you see others, you cannot like them. I'll give you an example. When you don't like yourself, you cannot like others. You cannot like who you're being around them. And similarly, if you cannot be content with yourself, then in some sense you can't be content with the world. This is what I understood. I understood that I had made myself only comfortable with the good things in life. I'd only acknowledged the good, as if someone who's choosing selectively not to see the other side of the coin. This was all subconscious, And then I realized that there is something here, and it's about life. There was this anime, Japanese comic book made into a show called One Punch Man. And there was this character in it called Garo or something. I don't remember the guy's name. Okay, but there was this evil guy in the show, and it was this universe of like heroes, right? And this kid, as a kid, like since he was young, he was fascinated by the villains rather than being fascinated by the superheroes. And so he wondered why the villains would never win. And when you look at it geometrically, the question makes sense. But when you look at it moralistically, it doesn't. What I mean by this is, it's as if you look at beings and you see the idea of freedom of expression. It's like that means we have freedom, for example, freedom of speech. It means you have the freedom to say, good things and bad things. But what the world has done is it has convinced itself that everything has to be one side of a coin. Good people, in some sense don't try to understand evil people, and evil people never wanted to understand good people. Do you see what I'm saying? There is something unknown happening here, and our relationship with it has to be beyond just our own, personalism. So, to the notepad we go. Alright guys, one of those episodes I gotta take off my jacket. Gotta get ready for this. Alright, let's do this. Yo guys, guys, I thought, I came to this question: what sort of world would a distrustful entity find itself in? This is one of those rare questions, it's like, I noticed something that when I went to school as a kid, what was going on was that the teacher was looking to see if the students had the right answers. The educational system is designed to give the child an impression that it has to always have the answer. Do you know? But in reality, I feel when I was younger, I felt a bit foolish, and that allowed me to actually think about, wait a minute, my whole life I've been trying to find answers. I've tried to be always the right answer, the correct thing all the time. Right, but what if the questions are hiding something that the answers cannot just reveal? That means, imagine somebody has a problem. They're like, I don't know how to solve this Rubik's Cube. And somebody comes up to them and they say, yo man, God is the answer. And the person's like, yeah man, but I don't know what that means. Like, which way do I have to move the Rubik's Cube? And the person's like, God is the answer. So that human being is given an answer, but they might not even know what question they are an answer to. It's the same way where I think when it comes to romanticism, human beings are like, yo, there's someone out there for me. Like, I don't know, whose husband I'm going to be, or I don't know, who my wife is going to be, but as if it's like it's like there is an answer, but on some level, the question, I'm pretty much trying to tell viewers that the educational system is trying to shape up an entity that feels it knows. But knowledge is encapsulated by the unknown, and the fact that we are not acknowledging the unknown before we know things is the reason when our knowledge breaks, we fear things. That means any human being, if you just wake up in the morning and you could be a secular person, you don't have to be religious even, just be like, okay, another moment in an unknown world. and you just acknowledge that there are unknown things. Do you know what kind of a freaking arrogance this creature needs to have to make assumptions on the whole cosmic activity? Do you understand? We're creatures that enjoy our arrogance. You know, there was a time where I was like, yo, why is there so much ignorance in the world? Then I was like, yo, what if the creature enjoys it? What if evil people enjoy being evil, right? And that's why they never update to see something better, for example. You know, in mysticism and metaphysics and theosophy, which relates to the idea of the invisible other, you see, on Earth, creatures are being valued based on their, let's say, substance, okay, based on what they are. In other dimensions, poetically, I would say, and playfully, I would say, beings are being judged based on their intent. Do you understand? That means they're not even physical entities. They might be an urge. In like ancient Vedic texts, you know, I remember reading something that blew my mind. You know, it was something where it was talking about, I think it was Kali. I don't know who it was. It was like some demigod, and in the Vedic tradition, they were like, anytime a person has greed, or anytime a person gambles, or anytime a person gets angry, they are actually creating a space for that demigod. So imagine every person who gets angry, they're like evoking a demigod in that moment. Do you know? Every person who does evil, it's as if they're evoking an invisible collective being, a collective context. In answering these questions, we get closer. You know, right now, our species isn't 100% trusting the world, but it's also not 100% distrusting the world. So it's kind of like 100% trust equals divinity. Equals ignorance. %50 trust what is obvious, I will say not that it's like multidimensionality is kind of obvious, but I would say like I was just thinking about how fascinating it was. Like, imagine if human beings never became conscious of themselves. It's like we would be in a world, but we wouldn't know there's a world here. And right now, Mr. Within is saying we know we're in a world, but we don't know how many other worlds are here. Everybody knows that if they go read something in a different language, they won't understand it. Imagine like you reading hieroglyphics. Guys, just a second, quick intermission, I'll be back. Okay. Alright guys, I'm back. You know, there's this song called Hammock Locating Silence. I haven't heard it in a while, but it's an epic song. Okay. What can we do with the world that we're given? We can at least look at it, understand it, use it somehow. Alright guys, to continue. So, we began, what would a distrustful species look like? You know, I just met someone, guys. Got distracted. This talk has so many intermissions. People are going to be like, Mr.Within, this one talk feels like 10,000 talks. You know? But you know, the moment goes forth. Okay. Sorry about that, guys, to continue. You know, guys, I'm a bit exhausted. It's pretty cold here. In the coldness of the world, you know, I'm talking about the warmth of greater dimensions. So, where was I going with this? You know, imagine in the future the talks get so complicated, I'll need like an assistant to like help me. All right, let me see. Let's start answering these questions, I guess. What is trust? I would say acceptance, contentment, and then love. These four. Trust, I think this is really what trust is. Trust is a combination of, you got to accept the moment. That's like trusting your being. You got to have contentment, means that you got to trust what the world's doing, and we human beings may not know what it is. We're on the shoulder of giants, but we must honor the giant. And when it comes to hope, hope is what people say when they haven't got into the future yet, but they have a sense of it. So when you get an inkling of where you can go, then you become hopeful. You know, there's this incredible story. And this story is about these two frogs, you know, that fall into like this hole, and all the frogs and frog will gather around the hole, and they're like, yo, dead frogs walking, you guys are never gonna make it. And it's like in this ridiculous anti-frog, like, you know, mob around the hole, telling these two frogs like, you guys are dead, you won't make it, you'll fail. And out of the two frogs, one of them after some time gives up, goes to the corner, and in some sense in the story dies. But the other one, the more people are being harsh and rude to him, the more this person is being animated, the more excited he's getting, the more powerful he's becoming. And people are like, what the hell? We're insulting him, we're calling him foolish, we're telling him he'll never succeed, but he's becoming stronger. How is this possible? And you know, the frog after some point jumps out, and it's like, you know, Neo being the chosen one moment. And then all the other frogs that were cruel realized this frog was deaf. This frog couldn't hear the nonsense of the world. He thought the crowd was cheering for him. He interpreted evil people as good and reached a good outcome. Mind-blowing. You know what that means? That means like those benevolent people right now, you know, kind people, let's say, you know, in it, like simple people, you know, they are in some sense, their only defense against kindness is God's divinity, like a sort of divine protection, you know. Like that saint all those yogis who go into the forest, people were like, yo, how can you go live in a forest where there's wild animals and stuff, right? And how can you sit down and meditate for years in the same spot when there's like wild creatures everywhere around you? And in some sense for them, entering a forest was like entering home. Because you see, there's a divine protection, but not in a humanized way. It's kind of like nature's grace and man personified. the concept oh man, you know, God to me is an unknown being that's knowing everything in an unknown way. And so human comprehension of the nature of being is shape bound. It's conditional to form. You know, I remember I was listening to this very incredible lecture from Richard Feynman. And Richard Feynman had this friend who was like spiritual or something, like a close friend who was spiritual. And the friend would say, you don't see the beauty I see in the flower. You don't see the divinity, the love, like God created all of this, right? Something like that. And Richard Feynman was like, yeah, I don't see that kind of beauty, but I see the beauty that it's as if, look at all the molecules, look at the atoms of that structure, look at the beauty of the geometry, look at how the forces, in some sense, reveal a sort of order in the chaos of this reality. You see, man's discovery of structure allowed him to restructure himself to then restructure reality. What is going on is an invisible being is visibly doing things. An eternal, invisible, it's like an eternal, when I say eternal, that means deathless and beginningless entity. A deathless and beginningless being is visibly trying to die. It's as if the eternal doesn't know if it's possible to die or not. And we are its greatest guess. You know, we think that death is wrong, right? People feel death is bad, right? And I'm not saying, like, see, death is a very, very hard idea to speak about, and no one can ever speak about it fully. You know, I'm just some 1 in 8 billion, just, you know, reporting back to my species. Reporting back to the advanced humanity. From Mr.Within, I would say for me, the most beautiful word in just ever I have come across. There's two. One is God, and the other is advancement. But they're both part of the same thing. So to me, advancement, if you're religious, it's God's greatest will. God's greatest ability through the form of man. You know, every person, you know, not just poetically, not just biologically, like every person has a heart. And, you know, back in the day, they didn't have a word for emotions, right? They would be like some things, like it would make my heart ache. You know, some things would make my stomach ache, but sometimes some situations would make your heart ache. And you know what's funny? The answer to what a distrustful species would look like, if the species doesn't trust its world, how can it stay in it? The genius of our ancestors were not just their efforts and strategies and tactics that got them here. It was their, in some sense, an emotional vision. Because I could do all the analysis I want, but at the end of the day, I'm like, how do I feel about my analysis? It's like one can even make the argument irrationality only exists for limited rationality. Because if the rationality was not limited, the irrational wouldn't be irrational. There could be a more advanced viewer. This is what has fascinated me. You know, if somebody says, Mr. Within, do you compare yourself with two humans? That means, is your role model a human? I will tell you, when I was younger, yeah, a lot of inventors and soccer players were like my role models. But after some point, I stopped caring about the role of other models, and I wondered about the role of my own model, the model of the human model I am. Do you know the human version I am? Do you see? And because this is the thing, you know, sometimes I give these talks is because my inner realms are like a window. They say the eyes are the windows of the soul, so that means the soul is looking through the eyes. Do you know? That means it's as if something from internal is externalizing, so the externalization's value is starting internal. So what it means is you could look at someone and be like, that's a good person, and your biological sight of them, that's objective, but what I'm trying to say is you're giving the world around you meaning. And the brain is so advanced, it does it instantly, to the degree that you see letters and suddenly you see a word, and then the word is a concept. And the concept is an image or an event or a story, a scenario. You know, when I was younger, I experienced cowardly moments and I lost respect for myself. And then I realized some part of my nature doesn't respect a coward. You know, that means if I am in this world and my fear wins, then it's as if I've been too stupid to see beyond my fear. That means I wasn't smart enough to bypass my own fear. That's what we need. We need the intelligence to bypass the fears that are inner realm convictions of what the outer realm is, but the outer realm is freer than that. Okay, enough of the notepad. Let's wrap this up. If the species distrusts itself, it didn't get to see what it would be like if it would have trusted itself. Right now, because it's not 100% distrust or 100% trust, anybody who wants one side of the coin has a 50% advantage. But the idea is distrust will lead to self-destruction, and trust will lead to collective construction. So individual self-destruction or collective construction. The sages would say there's two things you can really do in this world. You could either trust the world, trust your moment of being, or distrust your moment of being. You know, and some people are like, yo, what if I have so many reasons to distrust my moment? I'll be like, sure, but nothing happens. You see, we have to trust to enter a door. You know, my recent understanding view of death is it's a door, and my whole life I was afraid, as if I was being, you know, slowly pulled towards that door, and I'm running away from it. But for the first time in my life, I'm like, yo, it's a door. I'm going to go through that door. I'm going to see what's there. And what I mean by this is not an ignorance of life, but such a reverence for life that you actually see where else it can go. Do you understand? That means rather than the person being like, I'm afraid of death, the person's like, yo, I am experiencing such life that I'm wondering what's going to happen to this life. You see? So it's the continuation of, you know, it's like it's like death is a door for life. It's a door. If you believe in reincarnation, it could be a revolving door and you just don't know how to use the door yet. Can you imagine like endless beings reincarnating because they just don't know how to open a door? Like, how hilarious would that be? It's like, yo, don't push it, pull it. Or don't pull it, push it. So anyways, trust yourself, guys. Distrust is like, you know, accepting our inner realm's ignorance when the world is so big. It says, what are we considering to be the appearance of a species? Geometry, form, I mean, just shape, pretty much. What sort of world would a distrustful entity find itself in? It would find a world that it can't access. So beings that distrust, in Dante's Inferno, there was a place called a limbo state, which was a between world state. And it was, I mean, that's just story, but what it is it's the suggestion that if you distrust something, you're not giving an opportunity to trust something. And if you don't trust yourself, how can you survive? You know, I had to convince myself, not convince myself, but I had to really sit down and be like, yo, do I trust myself in this lifetime or do I distrust myself? Like, I don't know, whoever you are, do this. Just sit down in one moment and ask yourself, like, if you were your own leader, would you trust your own judgment? Would you trust your own vision? If you were your commander, imagine you were a soldier and you saw yourself was a commander, would you follow your own command? Would you trust your own eyes and the life force that you are? You see the power of trust. Trust leads to excellence, because excellence is through the conscious maintenance of responsibility. And it's like, you know, you can be responsible of a noun, but you can also be responsible of a verb. When you're responsible for a bunch of verbs, suddenly at some point, it's like the expansion of realities intersecting. So what it is imagine we have this small room and we have these balloons that will never pop, that are endlessly just expanding and becoming big, right? So what that means is the conscious responsibility of multiple movements in the space of a single moment will lead to the follow-up of consciousness of how each movement is expanding. So it would be another way of saying, I suddenly blow gas. Let's say we blow gas into these balloons in this small room, and the balloons are getting larger and larger and larger. At some point, the balloons are not touching each other, but then they start touching each other. This means that when it comes to the responsibility of consciousness in a dynamic world, it's as if jumping from surfboard to surfboard to surfboard, right? That means you could say like, yo, I was me the whole day. I woke up and then I lived as me and then I slept, right? But when it comes to the nature of a self-simulating mind, or the projective nature of our inner realms, it's what it is going on. It's like, yeah, sure, you surfed the whole day, but you weren't on the same surfboard the whole day. So anyways, guys, you know, trust your world. How else are we going to build an advanced civilization? We have to trust that we have an advanced ability to even do this, right? There was a point where I was like, yo, if let's say somehow, you know, everybody on the planet, 8 billion human beings, heard these Mr. Within talks, and they're like, all right, Mr. Within, let's build civilization 2.0. Let humanity build its advanced civilization. Let's do it, right? So if we all had it, right, then the next thing would be, in some sense, what would be the next step? right? After everybody's on the same page, what's the point of getting everybody in the same page? Or what's the point of getting everybody to acknowledge the same common denominator? The reason the idea of God, the concept of God, will pass the test of time, because it is it's acting as a common denominator agent. Do you see? That means human beings are like emptiness. It's like what does every person have in common? Nothing. And then what does every person have in common? Everything. But in the middle of everything and nothing, that's where we're different, and the different souls animate and the game is played. Trust the world you're in. It's an incredible opportunity, because once you trust something, it's like you're saying to yourself, okay, I was looking at the world in a certain way, now I am also capable to see what else there is, right? When I was younger, I didn't want to change myself. You know, I didn't like changing myself. But now, every day I wake up, I get so bored that in some sense I'm constantly trying to look, okay, what other way have I not used my mind in this lifetime yet? You know, in what have I not seen yet? You see, that fascinates me. Why? Because consciousness is not just, it's like, what's the point of physically surviving to accumulate experience? What's the point of accumulating experience to get to comprehend the nature of the experiencer? What's the point of comprehending the nature of the experiencer? We comprehend the nature of the world. What's the point of comprehending the nature of the world? We have finally comprehended the nature of how truth is holding man in the moment. Mankind is an exceptional species. We are exceptional life forms. You know, I wrote something years ago. It was called The Exceptionist. You know, and it was this, I fathomed this archetype of someone who the exception would apply any situation, you know. You know, a character in my sci-fi novel, The Messenger of Giants, everybody set in the year 5025, everybody already knows that character in the story. You know, everybody just calls them, oh silent one, oh wise one. And why do they call him that? Because this man has surpassed individual being to the degree that the world, everybody in the world knows his collective presence. That means, how did miracles happen? They happened because the authorization for their possibility was already there in the moment. How am I giving these talks? Because a part of me has already found itself capable of doing it. You know, it's like, I thought about it like this. I'm like, you know, when I was in high school, I was so nervous giving PowerPoint presentations. But you know, then at some point I was like, wait a minute, how come when I go and grab a glass, like a cup from the cupboard, and fill it up with tap water, why is it that I have this like next level confidence doing such a simple act? And why is it that when it comes to something like speaking, right, why was it, or like you know, public speaking, why is that in some sense difficult? And then I realized there's no difference. That's I think the true epitome of skill. That means it's like, what do the most advanced beings do? They don't need to prove their advancement anymore. They just know they are. And when you know you are an advanced being, you will have already found the advanced humanity. They say, you know, when the student is ready, the master appears. When human beings are advanced, the advanced civilization arises. Thank you for listening, guys. Love your world in order to understand your world. Because sometimes hate is an impatience that is not caring to actually look at how something works. Become so fascinated by your world that you become one of its greatest explorers. Thank you for listening. Much blessings and namaste. Share, subscribe, comment, like, join. And above all, rise, mankind, rise.